Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to another installment of the NTC Podcast. This is episode 104, sponsored by Sports Business Classroom. I'm your host, Aaron Washington. Co-host Avi Tyagi joins me once again today. And special guest back in the building, Brett Usher is back on the scene. We are so glad to have him back on this podcast, his second appearance. He's a writer, podcaster, drops a lot of great stats and clips on Twitter. So if you guys are looking for some great NBA content, be sure to check out Brett's content. Usher NBA is his handle over there. So love what he's doing. And just wanted to give him another quick shout out here for his proclamation of the rising of the Thunder this season. Before it was a popular take. Back in September, we had him on last. We had a deep conversation about the Thunder and Shea's MVP candidacy, and that's definitely come to pass. So that was just kind of really cool to see that unfold. But Brett, glad to have you back on the pod. Always great time chopping it up with you. I love what you do on Twitter. Just looking forward to another great conversation here, man. Hope you've been well.
Yeah, man, I've been good, been busy. We had our second kid 2 months ago, so things have changed a little bit, but for the better. But been staying busy, and definitely psyched to be back on here. Had a really great time talking with you last time back in September. So I was hoping we could do this again soon, and I'm glad we are here. About what 2/3, 3/4 through the season, whatever it is. So we got a lot to talk about. I love it.
We sure do, man. Congratulations on the new edition.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
man. I'm sure that you got your hands full, but
yeah, in a good way.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of excitement, guys, we have a few players here that we're going to highlight on this installment of the pod. This is going to be an awards conversation. So this one is going to be centered around Sixth Man of the Year. This is always a fun conversation to have. Every year we get several players that kind of work their way into the mix based on what they're doing for their teams in a non-starting role. But most of these guys, pretty much all of these guys play starters minutes, and a lot of them close games for their teams. So just because they're not starting, it doesn't mean that they don't have a humongous impact on the respective squads. So we have 6 names that we're going to hit up here, and I'm sure 1 or 2 other honorable mentions will come up during the conversation. But to get started, let's head out west, guys, West Coast, and we're going to discuss Norman Powell for the LA Clippers. So the Clippers are in the top 4 in the West. They had a tough loss last night to Minnesota, gave up a lead there after the Kawhi injury. But the bright spot in that game and pretty much the entire season for the Clippers has been Norman Powell. I mean, he's been sensational. Looking at his numbers here so far for the season, just under 14 points a game. So he's not one of those top 2 scorers off the bench, but he's definitely up there. And his efficiency marks are spectacular. 54 from the field, 43 from 3, 82 from the line. So he's been die for sure as a shooter. And particularly his corner 3-point shooting has been awesome. He's kind of picked up some of that slack that PJ has left on the table. PJ Tucker, he's kind of lost his magic from the corner. But here comes Norman Powell at 54% as a corner 3-point shooter. That's pretty much tops in the league when we're talking about efficiency. So, I mean, this guy hits over 1 out of every 2 3-pointers he takes from the corner. So that just kind of shows you what he's doing so far from that area of the floor. Career high or near career high marks from every area, from the rim, from 2, from 3. He's a true 3-level scorer, and the Clippers have really kind of embraced that, especially when you have guys like Kawhi, guys like PG. As we saw last night, at a moment's notice, one of them can leave the lineup for a variety of reasons. They might just need a game off. They might have an injury, but he's been so good for them. And you look at the Clippers bench as a whole. I mean, they're top 10 in field goal percentage, top 10 in 3-point percentage, and just outside the top 10 in points per game for that bench. And a big reason for all of those numbers is Norman Powell. And also wanted to highlight the fact that he's been really good at taking care of the ball and just leaning into what he does best. And Avi and I talked about this, Brett, before we went on the pod. The fact that he's really just been given the green light to be just an all-out scorer. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about setting up teammates and things like that. He can, but first and foremost, it's put the ball in the bucket. He's doing a great job of that. So career low in turnover percentage at 8.3%. And I mean, just all those numbers are great. Career low in assist percentage and assist to turnover or assist to usage rate, and those are numbers from cleaning the glass. So this is what this guy is doing right now. He's just been phenomenal, just finishing, taking care of the ball, getting good shots for his team, and just kind of amplifying what the Clippers do so well offensively next to all those great stars like Harden, PG, and Kawhi. So want to hand it over to you, Avi, here next to kind of see what you got about him. I know we talked about him a little bit before to kind of get going, but what have your thoughts been on Norman Powell's play so far?
I love watching Norman Powell on the Clippers, and I think the magic key here is I think Tyronn Lue kind of unlocked something here with the idea of less is more. All right, Norman Powell, we don't want you handling the ball so much. We don't want you to be forced to make too many creative decisions in terms of your passing. You have a good mid-ranger, but let's limit it. I think he's only 14% of his shots right now are coming from the mid-range, which is his the lowest in his career. He's not taking that many shots at the rim because as a driver, he can't quite get there. He doesn't have quite the same explosion as one of the guys we're going to talk about later. But, I mean, when you can shoot threes the way he's shooting it, I mean, why do anything else? 50% of his shots are coming from three. As you said, his corner three-point percentage is incredible. He can actually hit shots on the move, which is very helpful for a Clippers team that sometimes can get a little bit stagnant. You need a three-point shooter like that who's not just a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter or pull-up three-point shooter. Someone who can kind of run around the arc a little bit and give them that little extra juice. So just in that sense, I think Norman Powell has contributed a lot to their offense. Defensively, he is what he is. I mean, he's an older guard. He doesn't have quite that level of motor. He doesn't really have defensive playmaking ball skills, but I mean, he's still a great player, and that's why he's a sixth man, right? We don't want him taking those difficult defensive responsibilities. Let's just have him come off the bench and just fire away.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it too, just about him kind of leaning into his strengths or being directed to lean into his strengths and lean into that role. Like, this is a guy that could be a 20-point-a-game scorer easily as a starter. Like, he has that level of ability. There's no question. So like sometimes maybe the counting stats don't jump off the page. Like you said, he's just about 14 points a game. But it's a very potent 14 points a game with the efficiency that he's brought, especially this year. Just about 63% true shooting. I think about almost 44% from three on 5 attempts per game. So like he's one of the most efficient scoring guards in the league without a doubt, as you kind of outlined, with just from everywhere. And yeah, especially from the corners. That's crazy. I didn't know it was quite like that. But this is a guy that I think he's been one of the more underrated players in the league for a while now. He's been really good for a while. And it's like wherever he goes too, like, you know what I mean? He was really good in Toronto, obviously, and in Portland and now with the Clippers. Like, he's just one of those guys that you could plug him in anywhere and he's going to get you buckets and he's going to do it efficiently. Yeah, he doesn't hold up quite like he used to on defense, but he's not, a total disaster. I'd say he's below average for sure, to be clear, but he's not, he's got a little bit of size at least. I think he's only listed at 6'3", but he kind of feels a little bigger, always had.
Yeah.
Like if you told me he was 6'5", I wouldn't blink an eye. I think if we're talking about his sixth man of the year case specifically, I think, you guys kind of talked about it, but the efficiency, first of all, is a big part of his case. And then also just the Clippers' success. Like, I think when we're looking at this award this year, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how this conversation goes, but I feel like you almost got to think it's going to go to somebody on a good team. Cause there's so many, there's a couple guys on subpar teams that are having really good seasons, but it's like, there's so many, or at least like probably the guys we're going to talk about, that are on good teams, that it's just like that would kind of be the deciding factor. And obviously the Clippers have been really good. Like, once you get past that first few weeks of the season or whatever, when they really started clicking, they've been great. And he's been a big part of that. Just having a guy like that is so valuable, because he's consistent. You know what you're going to get with him. You know what he's going to bring. He's a professional, big Norm Powell fan here. So I think he's got a really strong case. And, I mean, I don't know if we're going to kind of rank these guys at some point, but like, I do think he's got a really, like, I'd probably have him as a finalist or like right there. You know what I mean? Like he's up there.
For sure. I would probably put him in honestly, if he's not one for me, he's two. Like, he's right there at the top for the reasons you mentioned, Brett. I mean, the team's success has to factor into this. Mm-hmm. And then even though he doesn't have the raw output, it's just the efficiency. Like, he's just getting great shots. He's making his shots. He's leaning into a role that suits him perfectly. And he's just propping up so many of these numbers for the Clippers. I think he's been a big reason as to why they've had such a strong second half run after they made that trade to get Harden. They iron out the kinks. He just comes right in and he plugs whatever holes they might have. So, I mean, even with a team with as much high-end talent as the Clippers, they need somebody like a Powell to kind of steady things when guys are hurt or they're on the bench and just need that extra little boost. So, I mean, honestly, I think he should be a favorite just because of all the factors that come into play here that we've mentioned here. So
he's like perfect. You know what I mean? He's like perfect in that role. Like that he's kind of giving you exactly what you want from that role. And a lot of times like that archetype, like this kind of like bench scoring guard, like they're not going to bring efficiency really. It's certainly not at that level. So for him to be giving them that, and I think he's been extraordinarily valuable and again, just super underrated and not just this season, like for a while now. So it would be cool to see him get that kind of recognition because, you know, I almost feel like he's due with what he's done in the NBA.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for his career, I mean, he has historically always been pretty efficient. Like that's the one fault that you can't really ascribe to him. He's been above 59% true shooting for the last 6 seasons, which is really good. And when you're coming off the bench, you want efficient scoring if you're just going to designate that role to someone and you're not giving it to one of your primary ball handlers. So it's really useful to have someone like that coming off the bench. I personally think I might have him third, but that's because there's 2 other players who I really like in this discussion, and we'll get to them later.
For sure. Yeah, guys, I mean, I think we've hit pretty much every mark with Norman. I mean, essentially, he's a star in his role. That's just what it comes down to. So let's get on to another player here that's also on the West Coast, and I have a feeling that he's also going to rank pretty high for all of us in this discussion. It's going to be Malik Monk here for number 2.
Yeah.
So Malik Monk of the Kings, I mean, sensational. I went back and watched his recent game here where he had 39 points. I think it was like a week or 2 ago. And I mean, 35 of the 39 came after halftime, which is just like, I mean, that just goes to show you how much.
Not only that, he had. I only remember this because I tweeted about it, but he had 4 points with 2 minutes and 40 seconds remaining in the third quarter.
Yeah,
he scored 35. I think he scored 11 to close out the third, and then 18 in the fourth, and then 6 in OT, and finished with 39. It's like that's Malik Monk.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, crazy.
Just insane. So, I mean, he's scoring a little bit more than Norman right now. He's at actually just under 16 a game. Efficiency marks are also very strong. I mean, 45 from the field, 37 from 3, 81 from the line. So he's a little bit lower from 3 and from 2. But, I mean, overall, still very strong marks. And he hasn't started a game this season. I mean, he's a pure 6th man. He doesn't start any games, but he plays a lot of minutes. He closes games, just like we saw the other night in that huge outburst, fourth quarter OT. He really demonstrated his value in clutch moments. And I think the big turning point for Malik, he's always been a great scorer, even back in Charlotte where he started his career. That's been his calling card. But now he kind of adds another dimension to his game, which is the playmaking, the passing, the just getting his teammates involved. He's up to 5.3 assists per game this season. He is at a career high assist percentage. So this is almost like the inverse of Norman Powell. Norman is like, hey, pure scorer through and through. Malik comes in, hey, I can score with the best of them, but I can also run pick and rolls. I can hit the roll man. I can hit these skip passes to 3-point shooters. He has a very high usage rate. So he's like almost like a point guard sometimes, like a pure point guard as opposed to like an off-ball scorer. 27 or just under 27 as far as the usage rate, which is a career high for him. So he's assuming a greater share of offensive possessions than he has in any other time in his career with the Lakers, with the Hornets, even last season with the Kings. Like his role has just grown bigger as time has gone on. So I think that's the really big factor for him that comes into play as far as his candidacy here. He brings the scoring, but he also brings another dimension. So even though, the Kings aren't quite as good as the Clippers this season, Malik has been just as important to this team, maybe even a little more important, because he is establishing these possessions to where he is running the offense. He is taking in that game where we just talked about where he scored 39 points. Fox did not play in that game. So Malik had to come in and assume that role for the team, which is basically a starter playing 35 plus minutes in the game in a clutch moment against a very good team and helping everybody get involved and helping them to victory. So that's his case. I'd probably have him right there with Norman. The two of them have just been sensational. And even though, the efficiency isn't quite there, you can give him a pass for that because he has been passing so well to all his teammates and keeping them involved here. So that's what I've seen so far from him. And he's just gotten better every year of his career. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Brett, what have you seen so far from Malik? And, where do you have him here in this kind of hierarchy of 6 men?
Oh, I think I have him number 1. Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this many times. I think he's the best bench player in the NBA. I felt that way last year as well, even though he didn't win 6th man of the year. I was like, I do think he's like the best player that comes off the bench in the NBA, the best reserve, and I definitely still feel that way. And I think this season he's done enough to really warrant winning that award. Barring some drastic change, he's going to be my favorite to win it. And like most likely, and my own personal pick, I think, just to clarify. But yeah, like, I'm glad you mentioned the playmaking. That's a huge part of it. Like, that's something that I think we saw start to emerge that season in LA when he really kind of broke out. And then last season it was legit, and it's actually, gone up even more this season. And he can do it in so many ways. Like you said, as the pick and roll handler, driving kicks, driving dumps. He does it in transition. He's got great chemistry with Sabonis. He's a natural playmaker. He really is. And he's a great passer. He's a combo guard, and I think he kind of came in, with Charlotte. People just thought of him as like that high scoring 2-guard microwave kind of archetype. And he's a lot more than that. And that's, I think, a big part of his candidacy. And Sacramento's not as good as like a couple of the teams we're going to talk about, like the Clippers, for instance, Minnesota. Like, they're not quite there, but they're 37-27 in a really tough West. Like, I think they have exceeded the threshold of like what we're looking at with these guys in this award. So that's not too much of a concern for me. But yeah, he's a guy that can just give you big games. Like, I was looking at it. He's got 23 games of 20-plus points off the bench this season. No other player in the NBA has more than 14. I think Jordan Clarkson's second with 14. And Monk's done it 23 times. And then, he had that crazy 39-point game we've referenced a couple times. He had 37 earlier in the season against Orlando. And so, like, just that ability, I think he had 40 at least once, maybe twice last season. That ability to just explode like that off the bench. Like, there's not too many guys that can do that. You mentioned his assist rate. That is tops among qualified bench players in the league this year, that 29.1%. And his 5.3 assists per game is second among all bench players in the league, behind another guy I might mention later on, maybe as an honorable mention. But so you couple that with the scoring that he brings, the athleticism that he brings, the energy, just like the lack of fear, like in big moments. Yeah. When you factor it all together, like, there's just not a lot of guys that can offer what he brings off the bench. And he's really valuable. And like, his presence in Sacramento has coincided with their success, obviously, like their return to the playoffs and probably again this season. That's not all him, but I do think he's a big part of it. And I wanted him to win it last year. I hope he wins it this year. Like, he's my guy for this award for sure.
I'm glad I get to go last on this, because I was having a conversation about Malik Monk, I think like a week or so ago with somebody else, just for fun on my own time. And we were kind of discussing the evolution of Malik Monk, because I just find him to be a fascinating player and also a great case study in the importance of actually developing your youth and giving the keys to someone once they start earning it. You set goals and guidelines for them, and then slowly let them feel that it's achievable. And as they achieve it, you give them more and more responsibilities and ownership of the offense. And I think Malik Monk is the perfect candidate. In Charlotte, I remember watching him early on, and there was always a feeling like he was drafted by the GM, but the coaches didn't really trust him. Part of that was because he was so scrawny at that point. He just couldn't generate efficient shots within the arc. It was really tough for him physically to be able to hang with the bigger guys and to kind of deserve those reps actually over Devontae Graham, who was much more polished at that time. And defensively, I mean, he was just poor. He was just a really poor defender. The Hornets would consistently get outscored by heavy margins when he was on the court. It didn't seem like he was improving defensively, and he didn't seem to work really well with the coaching staff either. It seemed like they didn't really like him, and he would get angry at them. On top of that, he ended up getting suspended for, I think, the starting point of one of the seasons there, and that just completely torpedoed what was left of that relationship. So it really did take for him to go to the Lakers on that. Was it a minimum? Does anyone remember here? Was it like a minimum?
Yeah.
I think it was like a 2
Yeah, I think it was a minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a minimum. And he went to the Lakers and kind of rebuilt himself from there. And then to watch the next step in his evolution with Mike Brown. Because Mike Brown demands a certain level of defense that even the Lakers coaching staff didn't demand of him. So he has improved his defense. I wouldn't call him a good defender, but the effort he's giving is much more consistent than it's ever been in his career. And on top of that, over time, I think he's learned that to be that 3-level scorer that he's capable of, he has to improve his vision. With the Hornets, he didn't really have much vision at all. Whenever he would get the ball, it was kind of like he was in that Cam Thomas phase. We were talking about Cam Thomas last episode. Just shoot. Playmaking, whatever. If someone's open, I guess maybe I'll hit it. Maybe I'll hit a roll man every once in a while. But for the most part, it was just shoot. But to have Sabonis with you on the court, and then to have Mike Brown kind of give you more ownership and kind of coax you into playmaking and saying, hey, here's the read, pass it to Sabonis, he'll give it right back, to kind of feel like, oh, I have a big man who I can trust. I can give him the ball and he will pitch it back to me and I'll get another opportunity to score. So it kind of builds more of trust and relationship with other players on that team. I just think it's unlocked everything for him. Anytime I watch him, he has such great synergy with Sabonis, and they're a match made in heaven. Because if Monk has any one weakness, other than defense, offensively at least, I would still say it might be a bit of his playmaking. And if Sabonis has any one weakness right now, I would probably say he can't go get his own shot from the perimeter, the same as someone like Sengun or Jokic can. So I think having those two partner with each other, you can see the synergy on the court. Monk is so explosive. Unlike even Norman Powell, I consider him a pure 3-level scorer. There's a certain level of explosiveness that he has vertically that Malik Monk and some of the other that Tim Hardaway Jr., Karis LeVert, and Norman Powell don't really have. We'll get to some of those guys later. He has that vertical explosiveness that makes him a much better rim finisher. From the mid-range, I like his game a little bit more right now than Norman Powell's. And then from the three, I mean, he's been shooting 43% from the corners as well, so not too shabby. I just think it's the perfect synergy of team, player, defensive buy-in. It's everything coalescing at once. And I think I still might have him second.
Ooh, spicy. Okay.
I like
All
it.
right. I like this bit. But you bring up a lot of great points, Avi. And I think the trust factor is like it kind of takes precedence in that whole conversation that we're having here. It just really all kind of blends together. Everybody trusts each other. And like you said, I mean, the synergy is awesome. So you love to see that from that team and love to see how they're all working together. And that case study was a great example of how a player's career arc can go. And sometimes it takes until year 5, 6, 7 to where these guys really grow into the optimal version of themselves.
It's exciting to think about where he could go from here too, because like
Exactly.
obviously like he's an unrestricted free agent coming up this summer. So it's like I think he's somebody that's going to get paid, especially if he wins this award. But like he's gonna get a nice little payday. And then like you start to wonder like, well, what's and this is a little bit unrelated to the award, I know, but like what's like the scalability of his game look like? Like could this be something bigger? Could this be a guy that starts and plays 32 minutes a game? Like he's obviously outstanding in this role he has in SAC. And like, I really would like to see him stay in SAC and stay in this role and everything. But like, this is the NBA. And I do wonder, like, you know, how much more could he scale his game up? Like I at this point, I don't really doubt that he could. Cause like you said, I think in the beginning, Aaron, like he's gotten better every year. And I love guys like that, where you can look at their numbers, you can look at their play, whatever metrics you want. Like he's gotten better every year. And that's very encouraging. He's still really young. Just a really exciting player. Certainly one of my personal favorites, has been for a few years now, for sure. So, yeah, I could talk about him all day with you, man. Y'all both brought up great points about him. So I love it. I love it.
Because watching him also makes me think. It just makes me appreciate. There's a certain level of fragility when you think about the draft. When players are getting drafted high up the way he was in the lottery, sometimes you end up going to a bad situation. So it just kind of illustrates that sometimes some of these lottery picks, you never know where their career can go. Like, imagine if he hadn't gone to the Lakers and he had gone somewhere else where he had, again, just gone shoved into a spot-up role the way he was with the Hornets. We might never get this version of Malik Monk. The first step of this process was the fact that he chose his destiny. He chose to go to the Lakers and rebuild his value there as a sixth man. And that kind of opened the eyes for the rest of the league. Like, hey, there's something here. That's how he was able to earn that contract with the Kings. So that's another reason I love watching Monk. I love seeing what he has become from where he was even 3-4 seasons ago when he was completely off the radar. It seemed like his career was just spiraling south. People were calling him a bust. Like, there were a lot of people just saying, oh, Malik Monk, and like, I think he was the 9th pick or the 10th pick. I forgot what number it was, but it was like, oh, Malik Monk was like a top 10 pick. I mean,
he was off the radar. Like, pretty much everybody was out on him, and it really is like a very interesting case study, and one from which I think lessons can be learned.
Absolutely,
and just how important situation and context is in the NBA. And that's a great point. Like, he chose to go to this situation and sort of put himself on that path, and he got a little payday, and now he's about to get a bigger one. So it's great for him, and it's great to see.
For sure. I mean, it all kind of proves that if you're in the right situation and you make the most of it, you're going to be in a great place the rest of your career. You know, while we're on the topic of getting paid, I mean, there's another player here in this discussion we have to shout out. He actually just got paid this past summer back in July. Naz Reid got a pretty nice extension here from the Timberwolves. And I can tell from the reactions here, this is going to be another great segment. We love talking about this guy. I mean, he's been so exciting this season, just watching him with Timberwolves team that's been phenomenal. So you look at what he got last year, a 3-year, $42 million extension for Naz Reid. A lot of people were skeptical, I think, about this deal, gave it a lot of hate because it's all about this allocation of funds for the Timberwolves. So you look at the roster and you're like, okay, you're starting 2 bigs. You have Cat, you have Gobert. They're making big, big money. These 2 guys by themselves probably take up 2/3 of the cap for that team just with those 2 contracts. And then you add in Naz Reid and you're like, okay, well, now you're paying – 75% of your cap or somewhere in that area to 3 big men. Like, you know, what are we doing here? And the guard situation is iffy. You have Mike Conley getting older. Like, you know, what is the whole rationale behind this deal? Here comes Naz Reid to kind of prove the haters wrong. 12.7 points per game, about 5 boards off the bench. He's shooting 41%, guys, from 3. This is a 4/5, shooting 41%. Very, very strong shooting marks for a guy like this. I mean, he just makes it look effortless, you know, from the perimeter. He almost looks like a guard sometimes, how he moves and how he gets his shot off. He's very comfortable, and he's really always been comfortable like that. And what's really cool about Naz Reid's situation is that this is a lot different from Malik. Like you mentioned, Avi, top 10 pick here from Malik. There are a lot of expectations coming his way when he came into the league. Not the case with Naz Reid. He was undrafted in 2019. So he came into the league and people weren't expecting anything from him. But year over year, he just kind of steadily improved and showed that he's the perfect new age big man that is strong. He's confident. He's physical, but he can also space the floor playing with this Timberwolves team that has a lot of guys that demand attention. So he's going to get looks, and he's made the most of them. So he's playing the most minutes of his career right now at about 23.2. If you look back at any other year of his career, he never got past 18 minutes a game. So for him, this is like a new frontier. I mean, he's playing 5 more minutes a game than any other season of his career. He shoots about 45% of his shots from 3. So this is kind of similar to what we were talking about with Norman Powell. He knows where his bread is buttered. That's a term I got from Avi. I like to use that a lot. I'm stealing that from him. He just knows where his money comes from, and he just takes advantage of it. But he leverages that skill really well with like getting to the rim. Because if you go back and look at clips from recent games, or really just any game this season, to where he has a look from 3, I mean, teams know what he can do. So there's a hard closeout when he's beyond the perimeter, and he can fake, he can take it inside. He has pretty decent ball handling skills for a guy his size.
Yes.
He can dunk on some people. We've seen that multiple times. He can put you on a poster. He's not afraid to get inside and get dirty. So I just love that he is aware of his strengths, and he's also aware of how he can use that to amplify other parts of his game. Yeah, he's not the greatest finisher in the paint. You know, he's not shooting an incredible percentage or from mid, but I mean, the dude can make it happen going off the dribble. And I mean, what more can you ask for from a guy that's coming off the bench? That's a big man, where a lot of big men can't even shoot beyond 10, 12 feet. he just makes it look effortless. So a lot of credit needs to go Naz Reid's way. He's a big reason as to why the Timberwolves for a long time were number one. Yeah, they've slipped with the cat injury, but they're still in the mix. They're still a great team. And he's just having a phenomenal season. We're just really adding new dimensions to his game, which I think deserve a lot of credit. So that's what I've seen from him so far. Avi, how you feeling about the one and only Naz Reid so far?
All right, this is what I was excited for. All right,
Uh-oh.
he was my number one here, and I love Naz Reid's game. Again, I just want to remind people, maybe some people don't know, this man's nickname is Big Jelly. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
He plays like that nickname. I really do think the gap between him and Karl-Anthony Towns, honestly, to me, comes down to explosiveness. Like, he's not that different from Karl-Anthony Towns in a really good way. Defensively, I actually think he's even more mobile than someone like Karl is, and I think that's incredibly important to why they've been able to support some of these two big lineups. I have lineup data right here. With the 180 possessions played approximately, the lineup of Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert has outscored opponents by 35 points per 100 possessions. Wow. And yes, I realize it's not a pure bench lineup. It's Anthony Edwards and Gobert in there. But I think it still kind of illustrates just how effective Naz Reid is capable of being defensively, because he offers you that second side shot blocking. Yeah, he doesn't have that level of vertical explosion. That's why he's more of a power dunker. Like, he can still dunk on you, but it won't necessarily, as an alley-oop threat, he can't get that high up off the ground. And vertically, most of his challenges will still be kind of below the rim, but he has such quick hands and such good timing. I like what he brings defensively. And then offensively, there are very few bigs I trust to be able to dribble the ball the way he can after, Big Jelly. And again, the shooting, as you said, let me see again. I think from the corners, he was shooting a pretty good number. Yeah, he was shooting 42% from the corners. So just like the rest of these guys, on high volume, but this is a big doing it and offering you defensive value. So that's kind of why I had him at one.
Yeah, I think I have him too. And this is, I think I go Monk, Naz Reid, Powell. Naz is one of my favorite players and favorite stories, really, in the NBA. He's transformed himself on multiple levels. You can look at the physical transformation. If you look at Naz Reid in high school or college or his first year in the league, he didn't look like he does now. I don't know how much weight he's shed, but it's substantial. And as a result of that, he's gotten significantly more athletic and better on defense, as you pointed out, Avi. And also the 3-point shooting. It's funny, kind of what you were talking about, Aaron, like his ability to attack the rim, his ability to drive. Like, he had that first. Like, a lot of times in the NBA, you'll have guys that can shoot to begin with. And then it's like, whether we're talking about like Duncan Robinson or Trey Murphy III, and the whole thing is like, okay, now they need to learn to attack closeouts. Naz had that, and he kind of did it the other way, where then he developed the 3-point shot. He's at 41.5% on 4.7 3-point attempts per game. No other center in the NBA this season is at 40% or better on 4 attempts or more from 3. So, like, he's legitimately one of the premier stretch bigs in the league. And that wasn't there his first few years in the league in terms of volume or efficiency. It wasn't there. Like, he's developed that, and it's legit, and it complements his handle and his driving game so well, which is what he always had. He was always such an interesting player in that regard, and just developing that shooting ability and getting in better shape has really turned him into this monster. And you love to see a guy that got paid and then got better. You know what I mean? The old thing was like, when guys get paid, they kind of get a little bit complacent. But with Naz, it's been the opposite. And he's a beast. And he's a guy whose numbers definitely don't do him justice. If we're just talking about the basic counting stats like that, 12 or 13 and 5 or whatever, like he's so much more valuable to that when you consider him in the context of this team and the spacing that he can now provide and just the different look. And everyone was talking about like this redundancy when they signed him, like they have too many bigs, but like, hey, Cat's out now. And so like we're seeing his value, not just that, but like just the different look that he brings. Just an outstanding player, like a fan favorite's fan favorite. I would phrase it that way. Like he's like the ultimate.
Perfect.
He's up there with just about anybody. He's so beloved. Like he might be like a top 5 most beloved Timberwolf in franchise history already. And I'm not even exaggerating. Like they love him. And rightfully so. He's such a fun player, big jelly fam. And he undrafted, and now he's like a top 3 bench player in the whole league, or however you want to put it. He's up there. It's just been great to see. And he's been like, look, they were in first place for, I don't know if it was the majority of the season, but for a lot of it in the West, probably longer than any other team held it this season, I think for sure. And he's a big part of that, man. And he's just going to keep getting better and expanding his game. And he's worth every penny of that contract, and excited to see where it goes from here. And I'm glad they could keep him. He's a big part of what they do and what they're going to be doing in the future for sure.
Playoff Nas. He wasn't a part of that mix last year.
Him and Jaden McDaniels were both out. And I think people forget about that. And they still arguably gave Denver the best fight of any team. And they did it they're almost built to beat Denver. And I mean, you look who Tim Connolly, like they're, you know what I mean? They're almost structured to beat Denver. And so I would have liked to have seen what that first round series looked like if they had Nas and Jaden. I'm not saying they would have won. I don't think anybody was stopping the Nuggets last year, but like that could have gone 6. Maybe 7. Sure. I don't know. What might it look like this year if we see it? I don't know. Like I like how they match up with them.
It's because they have the physicality, and they kind of have the options with those massive players out in the middle to kind of slow down the Jokic, Aaron Gordon synergy that they have going there. Most people can't keep up with that level of power, but the Timberwolves don't struggle with that. And again, it speaks to Naz Reid. He shed all that weight, but he didn't lose his strength from shedding all that weight. If anything, he actually gained more. Like he can really attack mismatches. He will bully you. He will power through smaller defenders or guys who just aren't at his strength level. Even other centers. It's just they're no match for him sometimes when he goes into one of his drives. I mean, he's just a phenomenal player, and he is incredibly integral to them finishing with like a top 2 or top 3 record. I think this finishing stretch might determine if he wins the award or not, because I think if they finish in the top 2 or if they somehow finish with the best record, and I think he's going to be incredibly important to that finishing stretch, and I think that might be enough for voters to just be like, hey, man, I don't know how the Timberwolves got here with Karl-Anthony Towns getting hurt. Oh, my God, look at the season Naz Reid just had. Oh, wow, he's starting and filling in for Karl-Anthony Towns, and they haven't skipped that much of a beat. We got to vote for him.
Yeah, it could be the icing on the cake. That's a good way to put it, Avi, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's obviously he's a skeleton key of sorts for this team. He unlocks a lot of what they do so well. And wish we could talk about him some more because, I mean, he's just been awesome. And, you know, he's a great story. We love stories like that, you know, here on this podcast. We've given the West a lot of love, but we can't forget about the East. The East has a couple of guys here in the mix here that also deserve some consideration for this award. Tough to put them in the same tier as the guys we just talked about, but they are still in the conversation. So the first of which is going to be Karis LeVert for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers have had a strong season. They've had their bumps in the road, a lot of injuries. It's been unfortunate for them. But one of the main constants for the team throughout all of the ups and downs has been Karis LeVert. This is a guy that we know can light it up with the best of them. You go back to 2020, March 3rd. It's actually just been over 4 years, believe it or not, since he dropped 51 points on the Celtics in a 129-120 overtime win. So as we know, LeVert's got the goods. He could put the ball in the basket. So for LeVert, he's more of the volume shooter and scorer as opposed to some of the efficient guys we talked about before, like Norman Powell. But still, he's been very good in a role for Cleveland. I do want to point out that his three-point percentage is a little disappointing this season. He's routinely been in the mid-upper 30s, and this season he's down to 32, 39 last season. So a little bit disappointing from that perspective. But for him, I mean, he's still playing a ton of minutes, 28.1 minutes per game. And the Cavs are about plus 3 points per 100 possessions when he's on the court. There is some noise in that, and there's some other variables, but he is a big part of what makes the Cavaliers run offensively when he's on the court. Because sometimes they struggle with that. They're not just a naturally super gifted offensive team with the Mobley and Allen redundancy a little bit with what they bring to the table. They're not the smoothest pairing. So having a guy like LeVert to kind of supplement the scoring attack for Cleveland is super valuable. So you look at his numbers and you say, okay, 14 points a game, just about 4 boards, 5 assists. So he is bringing the assists that it's comparable to Malik Monk as far as how often he's getting his teammates involved. So that's pretty impressive. And I also do want to point out that this is really the first season to where he's been 99% off the bench. You go to any other season year, a third to about 2/3 or more of the games he plays were as a starter. Even last season, he started 30 games for the Cavaliers. So a lot of these other guys, like, they're used to being off the bench. That's been their role majority of their careers. With LeVert, this is the first season to where all but I think 1 or 2 games are off the bench. So it's been a little bit of an adjustment for him. It's been a different role. But, I mean, by all accounts, he's doing well in it. And I think for him, and specifically with this team, it's something they really need. I think if he went down, they would be in a world of hurt. Their defense is going to be what it is, almost regardless of who's in the lineup. It's just a part of their DNA. It's what they're built on. The offense, at times, it's a question mark. And LeVert comes in, and he provides that in a big way for this team. And also that playmaking and that assist total that we kind of talked about with Malik Monk here a little bit. So he does bring that other dimension to his game. So he's kind of a guy that can do a little bit of both. So with LeVert, he brings the size, he brings the scoring. And although the efficiency isn't great, he still deserves to be in the mix just because of how much he brings to the Cavaliers. They're a great team. That adds to his case. And just how much they lean on him to be a generator for that offense here. So, Brett, want to get your thoughts next on LeVert here. I know he's not one of those favorites. He's maybe not as beloved as a Naz Reid or going to rank as high as Malik Monk. But what does Caris bring to the table uniquely that kind of puts him at least kind of in the conversation for sixth man?
I mean, he's a bucket. You know, he always has been. And I've always loved his game. I've always rooted for him. I've always been a big Caris LeVert fan. And it was too bad just all the injuries that this guy has dealt with, like even going back to in college at Michigan, like and then as he got into the NBA, it was just injury after injury after injury. And it probably sapped some of like what he could be as a player. But it's nice to see him healthy and hooping and contributing in a big way on a really good team. I mean, when they were shorthanded, when Garland and Mobley were out, like he was a pretty big part of their success. They were obviously, I forget exactly what the record was, but we all know they were really good over that stretch. And that was when he was probably playing his best basketball of the season. Now I think since then, you know, the last 20 games or so, like he's tailed off a little bit, like his numbers, his efficiency, everything's down a little bit, I think, since then, which, you know, obviously hurts his case. And yeah, I was going to bring up the Monk point too. Like, and I don't like to use the term like poor man's. Like, I feel like that's, it's just not, I don't like saying that, but like he kind of gives you what Malik does, but to a slightly lesser extent in terms of like the combination of playmaking and scoring and confidence and bucket getting, just all that. So yeah, like he's probably, you know, he's not like a finalist for me, but he's a guy that I really do like a lot. And he definitely deserves like, you know, top 6, 7, whatever, like probably the conversation we're having today, like type of consideration for this award. And again, just to like, he really was hooping big time when they needed him, but it's just like when they're at full strength or closer to full strength, like they don't need quite as much from him. So like the numbers aren't quite going to be there, but you know, when they need buckets, he's there. And I just hope he can stay healthy. He's still pretty young, very, very talented player. I forget which coach said it. I think it was, do you all remember him in the bubble? Like dude,
of course,
he turned into like MJ in the bubble. He was unbelievable in the bubble.
Him and TJ Warren, man.
Yeah, and some opposing coach was like, nobody can dance like Caris LeVert. And I was like, that's so accurate. Like that's the way he plays. He's so shifty. But yeah, he was a monster there. But yeah, that's just like, it's like when he's on the court, you see the talent. Very, very fun player. Probably not like a top 3 guy for me in this, but he's up there. Like definitely worth talking about, I think, today for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a Caris LeVert fan since, I don't know, maybe 2018. I like when he first got to the Nets, when they were just absolutely putrid, like completely unwatchable. He was one of the first pieces that got there that kind of helped turn it around. Even in that really fun, that league pass fun season they had in 2018-19.
Kenny Atkinson, yeah.
Yeah, the Kenny Atkinson team. Man. That team, D'Angelo, all those guys. God, God, I'm blanking. Jared Allen was there too. Jared
Yep.
Dudley. There was like a whole bunch of those guys on that team. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. But,
Yep.
yeah. On that 2018-19 team, I think people forget at the start of the season, before D'Angelo Russell kind of took charge, it was Karis LeVert who was first leading the Nets towards respectability before he had that devastating foot injury. And that's kind of when Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell kind of took another step forward and kind of announced themselves like, hey, even if LeVert's hurt, while he's hurt, we can carry this team. And that kind of got them into the playoffs. And then in 2019-20, he was also slightly injury prone here or there. Then he had a great bubble. And then after that, he had that terrible health scare as well. He got traded to the Pacers. He didn't seem like he fit with the Pacers. Defensively, they kind of had him playing more as a small forward when he was shifting his game towards being more of like a shooting guard, like combo guard type of player. It just didn't fit. Last year with Cleveland, it looked like he kind of didn't know where to fit in. Should he be a playmaker? Should he be a scorer? What's his role defensively? So it seemed like, where's Karis LeVert going from here? Is he just going to kind of fade out of the league slowly but surely? Is this like the beginning of the end? But then to see him kind of turn it all around and find his role with this Cleveland team, especially with Garland being hurt so much of this season with the jaw, the calf, and the hamstring, having him be able to show like, hey, I can take on this playmaking role. Defensively, I'll foul less than I have ever with you guys or with any of my last 2-3 teams. I'll offer you a little bit more defensive playmaking and size from the shooting guard spot, which is kind of useful because Mitchell sometimes will, well, not as much this year, but Craig Porter Jr., like they'll have guards who, Sam Merrill, they'll have guards who kind of take possessions off a little bit defensively. So you need some of that bigger bodied shooting guard sometimes. So I just think he's found his fit with this Cleveland team, and I hope he gets to stick around more and more and kind of develop his game. This feels like the first season in a long time where the 29-year-old Karis LeVert kind of knows what his role is, and he feels comfortable with the team around him, and the vibes are great there. So I kind of hope he gets 2-3 more seasons, and then we'll see what he looks like. I don't think his explosiveness will ever be like what Malik Monk is, and his three-point shooting won't be like what Norman Powell's is. But I still think he can make incremental improvements as a passer and as a shifty scorer, because I think there are times when pacing-wise he goes a little bit too slow. I wonder what the team ends up looking like if at some point they commit to permanently staggering Mobley and Jared Allen, because I have another lineup point here. The lineups with Darius Garland, Karis LeVert, Okoro, George Niang, and Evan Mobley. So we only have one center there. We have Okoro who can kind of cover a little bit for them all defensively. We have Niang and Garland providing some shooting. That lineup is plus 17.4 in around 200 possessions. Plus 17.4 per 100 possessions in around 200 possessions played. So I think he's found his fit with this team. I just want him to build more on this going forward. And I think he will, and I think Cleveland wants to keep him around. So we'll see how he goes from here.
Yeah, all great points, Avi. I think, he's just someone that they rely on a ton. And, it remains to be seen how he's going to kind of fit in down the stretch if they do decide to stagger. Well, we've talked about that on this podcast before. When they went with one big or the other, their numbers were awesome. They just all kind of fit together really well. So that we're going to have to see how that works out because that definitely is going to be tough to work out with the huge role that both of those big guys have for that team, just kind of with what they have going on there. So for the second to last player here, guys, that we're going to discuss, this is another flamethrower of the highest degree. And I'm sure if you guys just think back to the Rising Stars game about 10 years ago and the shootout that he had with Dion Waiters, that's right. The memories come flooding back. It was one of the best moments, at least in my opinion, that we've ever seen in the Rising Stars game. THJ is going to be the next subject of our conversation here. So THJ, I mean, what else can you say rather than just he just gets buckets? And for this season, it's no different. 16 points a game, so that's going to put him in the upper echelon of bench scorers that we're talking about here today. It's always been his calling card. When he was with New York, that was his calling card. Atlanta, with Dallas, it's what he does. And what makes him different from some of the other guys we've discussed already is that he doesn't really have other facets of his game that he can use or lean on when the scoring isn't there, when the shot isn't falling. And unfortunately, that's where he finds himself currently. I mean, the numbers for the season are still pretty good. I mean, he's at 35% from three, 85% from the line. But if you look at the first 18 games, or I'm sorry, the first 44 games of the season, Brett, I see you're rocking the Basketball Reference shirt. This is where I got these numbers. I mean,
hey, yeah, I'm a proud ambassador. I love Basketball Reference, man.
dude,
Same here.
Yeah.
they got
Love
it.
the shirt.
They got the goods. Just whatever you're looking for, they got it. So this
Sponsor us.
Yes, sir. The following stat I actually got from Basketball Reference. I just went on the game log and I looked at the first 44 games for THJ. He was at about 18 points a game, and he was shooting 37% from three, first 44. The last 18 games. So if we're looking at around the All-Star break, somewhere in there onward, only 10 points per game on 32% from three. So we're seeing how he's trailing off here. He's in a cold streak. I also went to Cleaning the Glass, and they have on one of their pages, it's basically a trend page. So you can look at the graph and see how all their numbers are trending up and down over a period of time. I went to Game Score, and I started at the end of January. His game score was in the teens. It was about 15 at that time. It's trailed off all the way to about 5 in the first half of March. Just if we're talking about game score, so we're taking all of his box score numbers and adding it up into one number. I mean, it's way down from where he was from October to January. So it's unfortunate for him, and I hope he can get out of this slump because it's down the stretch of the season and going into the playoffs. It always helps to have another guy that you can rely on to get the offense out of a rut when things are slow, when things are sloppy, not really working the way they should be. And it can also be tough for him sometimes because when you play with a guy like Luka Doncic, a guy of his caliber, a guy like LeBron, Harden, you're not going to have the leeway, the freedom, the runway to just say like, oh, hey, give me the ball. I'm just going to get something at the basket and just have, a 8-10 dribbles and just work my way through this. Majority of the looks you get are going to be kind of off the catch and shoot, catch, one dribble, drive, things like that. So, for him, it's like, hey, I mean, this is what you have to work with. You got to figure it out. And I'm confident in his ability to do that. There's still games left for him. It's just tough where he's at right now. But, I mean, you look at his history and look what he's done. He can definitely snap out. It's just going to be about seeing those shots go down. But his case is hurt by the fact that he's in the slump and he is not the playmaker that we see with a LeVert, with a Malik Monk. He doesn't have the defensive ability. I mean, he's pretty much a liability on that front with his slim frame, and he doesn't move super well, just navigating screens and things like that. So he's actually kind of a detriment to the team in that perspective. So that's why he's probably going to be near the bottom of the list that we're talking about here today. But if we started in October and went up to January, he'd probably be a lot higher here if we're just looking at the first half of the season. Like he was hooping. He was putting the ball in the bucket. But now he's kind of in a slump and things are a little bit different for him. So that's where he's at so far. Avi, any other points about THJ? I mean, is he at the bottom for you as well? What have you seen from him?
Among this group of 6, he'd probably be 6th for me. I mean, he was in consideration for me. He might even be lower, depending on some of my honorable mentions. The reason I kind of feel that way is part of it is it's tough to actually evaluate what his skill level is capable of versus what the team is asking of him. So, for example, if you go to NBA.com's tracking data, Karis LeVert, for example, has been averaging 11.7 drives per game, right? And on those drives, he's shooting around 5 times per drive. He's shooting about 5 times on those 11 drives, and he's shooting around 43% on that. So that percentage isn't great, but when you watch him play, you can see those drives. He doesn't have the sort of north to south explosion, but he's so crafty and shifty. He can still get in the paint, but then sometimes because their spacing is condensed, he kind of gets trapped in there, and that's when he ends up missing some layups. But when I watched Tim Hardaway Jr., partially because he's with Luka and Kyrie, so there are there's not that many opportunities for him to kind of be that all-ball playmaker. He only averages about 3 drives per game, which is very low. And so it makes me question, on another team, could he be more like he was with the Hawks when he actually would be more of a self-creator? Whereas right now, he's kind of more of a tertiary scorer, and it's basically confined to just shooting threes. And his 3-point shot might be the streakiest part of his game. So when evaluating him, it's a little tough for me because defensively, as you've discussed, we already know what he is. He probably is going to be a liability on that end. But then offensively, it's looking at bits and pieces of his game and trying to make out, okay, on a different team, on a different scale, is this still a player who I think is capable of being a positive because he has that level of burst, and I think he still possesses enough burst. And do I think he has the handle where he could be more of a playmaker on another team? The verdict is out there. I'm not 100% sure about that when I watch him play because, again, there's so few reps of it, and he doesn't even. I wouldn't say he's particularly the best at attacking closeouts either. He's kind of just like, hey, this is my shot. I'm going for it. Again, shooter's mentality. I'm just going to chuck some threes up, and I feel pretty good about it. So it's hard to tell with him on a different team with a different coaching staff, giving him different sorts of instructions. What would his play style look like? I think he is a somewhat adaptable player, as he's evidenced on the 3 teams he's been on. With the Knicks, he was a kind of different player than he was with the Hawks. So I just wonder what is the best version of Tim Hardaway Jr.? Who is the real Tim Hardaway Jr.?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably in my top 10, I think, for sixth man, but definitely like toward the back of that. And like you said before, like if we were talking like first 2.5, 3 months of the season, like he might be a finalist. Like he might be top 5, I think, for sure at that point, but he has kind of tailed off. And that's the thing, like if we're just talking about his case, like it's really the inconsistency. Like he's in a slump now, but he, next game could come out and get you 37 on 80% true shooting or something. Like he can get hot, but it's just not consistent. And as you kind of brought up also, Aaron, like, if he's not giving you that, if he's not giving you the 3-point shooting, like what does he really offer? Like he just doesn't have any other real strengths to fall back on. So like when he's going, he's great. And that's super valuable, obviously, on a team with a guy like Luka that draws so much attention and is so good at finding open shooters. So he's very valuable to the team just in that, like he can give you that every so often, or even like if he gets hot, for a couple weeks or maybe a playoff series, right? He could probably win you a playoff series, like with just his hot shooting. Like he can get crazy hot from deep where, there was a game earlier this season. I don't know if he had 8 or 9 or 10 threes or something, but it was crazy. And he's had a lot of those games where it just feels like he can't miss, but he's not the most consistent. He's 36th all time in 3-pointers made already at age 31, which is pretty wild. That
is wild.
He passed his dad earlier this season in 3-pointers. So he's 36. Like I was looking at it and like when it's all said and done, like he's going to easily be in the top 20, if not higher. I mean, the guy has been knocking down threes for a long time for sure. And so I think, a nice player for Dallas, valuable player for Dallas overall, I think, in what he offers. But probably like toward the back end of like my top 10 and sixth man. But I do remember having like a similar conversation, and I don't know if it was like December, and like people were like he could win it. Like he was right near the top with any of these guys back then. So, but it changes.
It does. It ebbs and flows for a lot of these guys, with the roles they occupy. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately for him, it's just like, hey, it's not falling right now, and people are losing trust in him. His minutes are going to suffer, and we'll see. If he gets a shot in the playoffs, I think he's going to have a short leash, a very short leash. Yeah. But in that short period of time, he could, like you said, Brett, just kind of go off and give you a 20 or 25-point performance.
If he goes off for 35, like in a playoff game, on like, I don't know, 7 of 9 from 3, like that, seriously, that could win you a game, and one game could win you a series. So like, you don't know if he's going to give you that. I agree. He's going to have a short leash, and rightfully so, but like just that potential, I think in itself has quite a bit of value, especially alongside a guy like Luka.
Absolutely. So guys, Tim Hardaway formerly played for the Atlanta Hawks, and that's where we're going to kind of settle down and kind of bring it home for this conversation. So there's 2 Bogdanoviches in the league. We're not going to be discussing the New York one right now. He's actually, kind of been rough here recently, but do want to give some praise here to Bogdanovich. I went back and I looked at his numbers today, and Avi, I'm glad that you recommended for him to be one of the subjects of our conversation, because he's having a very strong season. He's actually playing, I think, the most minutes per game of any of the players we're discussing today. Just about 30 minutes a game, just under 30 minutes a game. So, I mean, a lot of minutes, a huge role for this team, especially with the Trae Young injury. I mean, they're really leaning into what Bogdanovich brings. About 16.8 points per game. I don't have the leaderboard in front of me, but that has to be near the top.
It's the top. It's among guys we're talking about today. It's the top, and I think he trails only Jordan Clarkson if we're talking about points per game from a primarily bench player. So yeah, he's up there. Like he's scoring more than Monk, more than Hardaway, more than Nas, any of these guys. So yeah, that's a lot. 16.8 off the bench is no joke.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, even in today's day and age where, the points are just going through the roof, like, 16.8 and you're not starting games, it's very impressive. So for him, I mean, he's 37 from 3, he's 91 from the line. So you foul him, he's automatic. He's one of the best free throw shooters in the league. He started 16 games, so he's not as much of a pure bench guy as some of the other people on this list, but he's still primarily off the bench. And the Hawks offense is better when he's on the court, plus 7.4 points per 100 possessions. And I haven't got to watch a ton of Hawks this season. I told Avi about this before we went on, Brett. I'm in the Atlanta area, so you know what that means.
Oh yeah, I'm in the DC area. I'm suffering not being able to watch Wizards games.
Oh, that's just tragic, man. Wizards is not Wizards basketball.
Oh man, you're really missing out.
Yeah, seriously.
No, it's they need to figure that out. It's insane.
They really do. Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But I did get to see him in person once this season. I went to a Hawks game. They played the Raptors on the 28th of January, and he dropped 24 points on 7 of 11 shooting. So I have seen him in action. I have watched him plenty of times in the past. So with Bogdanovich, I mean, he came in and, I mean, he just automatically, this is what his role has been, even since Sacramento, when they were going through that whole transition and trying to figure out what their centerpieces were, where the foundational pieces were going to be. I mean, Bogdanovich even back then was a guy that, okay, you can play a secondary ball handler role and just go out there, get good shots, make your threes, make free throws, be a very efficient player, assume a large portion of the offense, and just be an engine for a team, whether he's coming off the bench or scoring. That's the beauty of Bogdanovich. You can lean on him in either role, know what you're going to get from him. And, I mean, he came in as an older rookie. He was 25 his first season in the NBA. And he's
almost 32 now. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem like it. But,
no, it doesn't. I looked at him like, man, like the dude is actually low-key old now.
I thought he was like 28, like it's crazy. Yeah.
He plays with the spirit of a young man.
He looks young too. Like it just,
he does. I mean, if you look at his years in the league, you would think he's like 27 or 28, but he came in older, so it's a little bit different. But I mean, he just knows who he is. You don't have to worry about erratic play. You don't have to worry about crazy highs and lows like you see with THJ. He's very steady as a 2 primarily, sometimes a 3, just coming in with a good amount of size. I think he's 6'6", 6'7". He can shoot over certain players at times. He can make tough shots. That's a part of his game that also allows him to be very successful in a variety of different situations. He doesn't have to have super clean looks. He can make the defense pay regardless. So the Hawks are really happy to have him, especially in the Trae Young injury era here. On this list, I mean, looking at his numbers, the big factor for him that hurts is the Hawks' performance. I mean, that's the part that hurts them. They're below 500. I mean, they might not even make the playoffs at this point. They're barely in the play-in. It's just rough for him from a team perspective. But individually, very strong season. If the Hawks were in the upper 6 of the East, this is a different conversation. If they were performing at the level of the Kings or someone of that long, or the Cavs, then yeah, he's probably top 3, top 4 for sure. But Brett, where would you have Bogdanovich on at least in this list of 6? Where would you try to place him at?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have him ahead of Hardaway. Sure. So maybe 5th on this list, and certainly in my top 10. You nailed it though. Like a lot of it is the Hawks. Like, and for me personally, like they're probably the most disappointing team in the league this season. Like I thought they were going to be 5-6 range.
Me too. Like
I would have put money on that. Like I really believed in this team. Believed in Quinn Snyder, believed in Trae, believed in all of it, believed in the composition of the roster, the growth of Jalen Johnson. And it's weird because we've seen that. Like that breakout happened. I know he missed time and like now Trae's out. So it's just been kind of a bummer of a season for the Hawks. They should be much better. And yeah, if they were the 5 seed, like he might be right there with like Norm Powell and, you know what I mean? Like for the 4-3 range in this. He's having that good of a season, but yeah, I love watching him shoot the ball. I'm glad he's healthy. Like he's a guy that's he's kind of had a bum knee like the last couple of years. Like he's never quite looked right. Like this is the best he's looked in at least a couple of years. So I'm glad he's healthy. He's hooping. He's high volume from 3. I think he's over 8 attempts per game. And yeah, definitely a really nice season, really nice player. Certainly older than I think almost anybody would think. But I think he's got some good years left in him for sure. And I don't know. It's like I want to say like I would like to see what he would look like on a good team. So I think he would be a guy that, you know what I mean? He'd be super valuable on a good team. And I almost feel like this good, healthy age 31 season is kind of being wasted on this disappointing Atlanta team. And yeah, they're just a bummer. I don't want to talk too much more about that just because I'm pretty sure I tweeted about him, like I believe in this team, like what, don't be surprised if they're like in the 4 or 5, like blah blah blah. They really let me down, man. What did you say? They're the 10 now, like borderline playing. But yeah, so that's really the only thing holding him back is the Hawks record, because he's been outstanding. He's been, you know, certainly like probably one of their 4 best players this season, I would say.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, I don't have that level of disappointment because I just went and looked and saw what I actually wrote for us, and I had them 9th. So I kind of—
There you go. You were on the money.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got that one.
It wasn't because of him or because of the guards. I had a little bit more questions about their wings, and I feel like that's kind of borne true, even though Jalen Johnson has had a breakout, and it's worth mentioning. I think the group as a whole is still a little bit lacking, and defensively, they're still a mess. But anyways, let me get back to Bogdan. I just love watching him with Quinn Snyder. I think it fully unlocks his potential as a three-point shooter. They set up so many of these secondary actions for him where he'll be coming off of pin downs, he'll be coming off of a screen set for him, and he'll just be flaring out across the three-point line, across the arc. I think in terms of off-screen threes, he is top 10 in points created from off-screen threes, and he's in a list of names like Paul George, Michael Porter Jr., Davis Bertans now with the Hornets, Kevin Durant. Like he's in that level of off-screen shooting. Not Splash Brothers level. Those guys are kind of like their own outliers, but he's in the tier with the rest of that group. And I think visibly, I feel like he is the perfect player for Quinn Snyder because he has elite shooting capability. I know he's only at 37%, but if you go look, some of that can be explained by the level of shots he's taking. He's only taking less than 25% of his shots from the corner. And from the corner, he's shooting like 43%. So it kind of is like some of these other guys we've mentioned. It's just that he's taking a more difficult load of three-pointers. He's shooting 13 three-pointers per 100 possessions, which is a very high volume. That's borderline Sam Merrill territory. That guy's crazy. I love him. But yeah, it's just, I love watching his play. He offers some of that secondary playmaking that someone like Tim Hardaway doesn't. I wish Tim Hardaway kind of added that to his game because both of them I feel are kind of similar. I'm not sure they can really drive to the hoop, but Bogdan is just so good about moving the ball and making sure his shot selection is relatively clean. I just think he's a great fit with Quinn Snyder. I wish he wasn't 32 on such a mediocre team and he still had Quinn Snyder as his coach, because if he was like 28 in this position and the team was a little bit better.
Those Jazz teams, like imagine him on those Quinn Snyder Jazz teams like 4 years ago with Bojan, with both of them on there. Like he would have been sick. I mean, he really is a perfect Quinn Snyder guy, though.
He's perfect Quinn Snyder player, and I feel like even Quinn Snyder I wonder if Quinn Snyder just looks at him and thinks, "Oh man, we could have won another round if we had you." That Nuggets Jazz series that was a 7-gamer. I 100% feel like he watches Bogdan play and thinks, "Oh my goodness!" Because even the threes he hits, he's added the no dip three. He's done a couple of those recently. I didn't know you had that in your bag. Okay, all right. Yeah. He's such a good player. I'd have him 4th on the list for me just because I feel like his shot making is incredible. But I mean, yeah, he's probably just not going to win it because of how just mediocre the Hawks are.
But in another year where these top teams didn't have, because look at Denver and Boston, like they don't have anybody that we're talking about at all. So like a lot of times the top teams don't have that. They'll just more have like a bench by committee. But this year you have like the Clippers and Minnesota and some of these teams that are higher in the standings that have these very worthy candidates. So like he kind of gets pushed out. But I think there's been seasons in the past where like a guy playing like he has for a 10 seed would have a real chance at this, you know?
Yeah.
For sure. Hey guys, right before we wrap up this podcast, I'm going to bring up one more name that I think we're all thinking of as far as honorable mentions. Before he got hurt, Westbrook was in the conversation.
Yes.
Love.
I was going to mention it was one of my honorable mentions.
Good honorable mention. Can I give you a couple quick ones?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to do the same.
Yeah. All right. I'll give you one then.
Okay.
How about this? Jaime Jaquez Jr. for Miami.
Ooh.
He's averaging just about 13 points a game. Really good efficiency. Man. He started a handful of games earlier in the season. I don't remember if it was 10, 15, 18, 20, but he's definitely primarily a bench guy. And I don't think his numbers might have got juiced a little bit by some of those starts, but he's put up numbers as a reserve too. And I just think he's notable just because he's a rookie. And I think he would legitimately be in my top 10 just based on how good Miami's, not been great this year, but they're getting better. Like I'd say they're a good team for sure. I think they're a team people are starting to get worried about, and just the value that and the consistency really that he's provided them. So he'd be like in my honorable mention group. I wanted to mention him just because he's a rookie, and shout out to Jaime, man. He's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very verbose.
Great job at redeeming yourself from the whole Celtics appearance with the hat, man.
Yes.
Oh my God, I forgot I was wearing a Celtics hat. This is like blasphemy.
I'm very verbose, so I'm just going to go through this real fast. I had a bunch of honorable mentions. Shout out to Duncan Robinson. His game is back. His three-pointer's back. He looks like the real Duncan. He's putting the ball on the floor. It looks great. That crossover he had the other day was nasty. Okay.
Most improved? He'd
be up there for me. He'd be top 5 for me in that. Yeah.
Shaquille Alexander-Walker, I just wanted to throw him in here because I love his screen navigation. I think his defense is awesome and his shot is falling. Walker Kessler, just because he blocks so many shots, it's just really fun to watch. He's a simple man. I block shots. I finish dunks. Easy peasy. Isaiah Hartenstein, I like his rebounding. I think he offers a different look for them defensively, and I think he has a little bit of a post game too. I mean, he's always had that, but he looks good with the Knicks, so I wanted to shout him out. Kelly Olynyk, he's I don't know if he really he started a bunch of games for the Jazz too, I think, but he's come off the bench a majority of the time. I kind of like his secondary playmaking. He can shoot too. For the Jazz, he was almost a de facto point guard in a couple lineups, so want to throw him out. And then I just want to throw out the timeless Al Horford because Porzingis has been hurt a lot, and they just put Al Horford in, and they almost never skip a beat because he's still Al Horford. He still shoots well. He doesn't foul very much. He's a great defender against big men. He can play multiple coverages still, despite being, I think, what is he now, 37? So I just wanted to throw him out there.
If you're going to give it to a Celtic, or put a Celtic name in the ring or whatever, like it would be Al. Like, and here's one, like Al. If it wasn't for injury, I really think, and we could maybe see this next year, Trey Murphy III would be in there. Like if you look at the way he's been playing recently and what he was kind of projected to do this season before his knee injury, but he missed the first month or so of the season. And then, he kind of took a little while to get his legs under him. But if you're looking at how he's playing now, he might be the best, maybe the most valuable bench player in the league right now. He's a big part of New Orleans' success. Last honorable mention I wanted to mention was a kind of a two-parter for Orlando. These are guys that won't get consideration for the award. That whole bench is phenomenal altogether. But I want to do a two-parter with Cole Anthony and Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner has been so good. He's been so efficient. He has so much toughness, shooting, finishing. Like he's so valuable to that team. And Cole Anthony as well. Like he does not get it nearly enough love, but like he's another guy where it's like how many guys bring what he brings off the bench. When you look at his scoring ability, the playmaking, the tenacity, the defense, just playing bigger than he is, getting rebounds, blocking shots. Like I've seen that guy win multiple fourth quarters for this team with his play. The numbers don't reflect it, but he's outstanding. I think he's pretty underrated. And just that bench as a whole is one of my favorites in the league, maybe second only to New Orleans if I'm talking about like my personal favorite. So honorable mention to those two guys as well, for sure.
I like that. Obviously, guys, there's so many players around the league who deserve a whole lot of credit for what they're doing off the bench. And I'm glad that we were able to at least get to a decent amount of them because all these guys deserve a lot of credit. And these 6 that we primarily focused on, I mean, they've just been awesome for their respective teams, and hopefully they can continue their strong run because the playoffs are around the corner. So on that note, we're going to wrap it up here, guys. But always a great time. Avi, as always, having you on. Brett, want to thank you for taking the time. to join us once again for part 2. Just as fun as the first, actually probably even more fun than the first. Just now that we're in the middle of the season and we can kind of break things down as they've been happening. But wish you all the best, man. Good luck with the new kid in the house, with the responsibilities with that, and hopefully all goes well for you, man. So appreciate the time.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. That was a ton of fun for sure.
Awesome.
Loved it.
For sure. So guys, if you're want to check out more of our content, be sure to visit us at notradeclause.com. And then our socials are notrade_clause on Twitter, and Instagram is going to be notradeclause, all one word. So we're just going to start it, guys. Playoffs around the corner. We have playoff podcasts coming up here. We have interviews on the way. So be sure to keep it locked here on NTC, and we'll have more for you very soon. So thanks for checking us out, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.